So we're going to be doing a review over the respiratory system and the pathway that the air is going as it's going into your system. So for starters, it's either going to be entering in the nasal cavity or the oral cavity. So I'm going to start drawing something very simple. And the first thing that it's going to go through would be the nose. And whenever we breathe in, if we think like, okay, well maybe like there's a yummy smell of cookies or there's maybe pizza, and then all of those scents are gonna go in. We breathe in, and then it's gonna go down this tube, and that tube is gonna be called the trachea. And then that trachea is gonna end up branching off into two tubes that we call the bronchi. And each bronchi is going to go into each one of our lungs. So we have a left lung and we have a right lung. So I'm going to label this, it's going to be the bronchi. And the bronchi is then going to branch out into lots of little bronchioles. And so they just keep on expanding and they take up the entire lung. So I'm going to kind of draw our lung, and that'll help us give a visualization. That's one lung, and then we have our other lung. So this whole structure, left and right side, this would be our lungs. And then when the bronchi branches off, all of these little parts that are coming off of it is called bronchioles. And then at the very end of the bronchioles, that's probably the most important part of our lung. And they kind of look like little broccoli at the end. So we're just going to draw lots and lots of little circles at the end of every single bronchiole. They take up the entire lung. Lots of circles, because we need lots of oxygen whenever we inhale. And then all of those circles represent this funky word called alveoli. So when we breathe in, it's going to go through this process every single time. It enters the nose, it goes down the trachea, breaks off into the two bronchi, and then it scatters into all the bronchioles, into the alveoli, and that is basically our entire lung. And then underneath, which we don't think about, but when we're inhaling, we have to have room for our lungs. So we're going to kind of draw this structure down here, and that structure is called our diaphragm.
Okay, so the diaphragm is skeletal muscle tissue because it attaches underneath your ribs on both sides of your rib cage. Therefore, it's going to be skeletal. There are some other little muscles that are involved inside the rib cage that assist the diaphragm, but the diaphragm is skeletal muscle tissue. So it does contract and relax just like all the other muscles in your skeletal system, all those other skeletal muscles that do. In a sense, it's involuntary, because you do it when you don't think about it. You don't have to think about inhaling and exhaling. Your body just naturally does it. However, you can override it. It's kind of a lot like blinking. So you can hold your breath when you go underwater, but eventually your nervous system kicks in and is like, hey, you got to take a breath. So you have to breathe. So how does the diaphragm work? Well, skeletal muscle tissue contracts and relaxes. So when you take in a deep breath, your diaphragm, pretend like my hand here is the diaphragm. Your diaphragm contracts and flattens out. So this is a contracted state for your diaphragm. So when you inhale, your diaphragm contracts, your ribs get big. Your ribs kind of go up and out. So when the diaphragm contracts, it flattens out, ribs lift up. That allows room for your lungs to take in oxygen, and it allows them to get big. So that's kind of a change in air pressure, which allows the oxygen to rush in to your lungs. So on an inhale, your diaphragm is going to come down and flatten. Let's see if we can see. my left-handedness. Flatten, that is on an inhale. Okay. When you exhale, the diaphragm goes back to a relaxed state. So this is contracted. When it relaxes, it goes back up to a relaxed state, so back up to a dome, and your ribs also fall downwards. So taking a deep breath, let it out. Your ribs go back down. And so when that happens, you have the diaphragm coming up and the ribs coming down, and it kind of squishes your lungs. And when it squishes your lungs, all of that air is going to be forced out of your lungs, so the carbon dioxide goes out. So it goes, your diaphragm goes back up, that's relaxed. And that is an exhale. Okay, so that's how the diaphragm works, and that's how you're able to take in oxygen. And get rid of the carbon dioxide, because that's important. You gotta get rid of the carbon dioxide. All right, so now I'm gonna kind of come over here and zoom in on an alveoli and show you how gas exchange occurs. So, like Miss Alleman said, alveoli is a bunch of tiny air sacs that attach to a bronchiole, which attaches to a bronchi, and so on and so on and so on. So we're kind of drawing a magnified version of this here. So each alveoli are surrounded by capillaries. Capillaries, as you know, is a blood vessel. Your blood vessels, the capillaries are so small that the cells have to travel in a single file line. They have to go one behind the other. So all of these little alveoli are surrounded by capillaries. So I'm going to just kind of draw. This isn't like too realistic, but let me make it bigger than that so you can see. Okay, and I'm going to label, let's see what color, brown. So these are, just relabel what Miss Alleman labeled. Just label the alveoli there. I'm going to label the bronchioles. And then she used purple. Purple. Keep up with all Miss Alleman's colors. Bronchi, okay. And then what color? I don't guess it really matters. Make this a capillary. So, I'm drawing kind of a simplified version, but just know the alveoli are covered in capillaries. So inside your capillaries are your blood cells. So I'm going to draw some red blood cells here. And we're going to use red to represent our oxygen gas, because your oxygen gas makes the blood red. So the more oxygenated the blood is, the bright redder it is. So oxygen gas here. So I'm going to draw little O2s inside here. And then your deoxygenated blood, that's blood that's high in carbon dioxide, that gives the blood a more of a maroon purple color. So I'm going to use purple for that. And just write in some CO2s for carbon dioxide. Okay. So your oxygen is going to go in your blood cells. Make little red spots. It's going to go in. And carbon dioxide is going to go out. So the capillaries, inside the capillaries, your red blood cells is dropping off carbon dioxide, but at the same time, it is picking up the oxygen. So it happens simultaneously. So oxygen's being dropped off, carbon dioxide is being dropped off, oxygen is being picked up by the alveoli. And there you have respiration.